Alright, after one movie that was awesome and a sequel that was disappointing, the Pacific Rim franchise is back once again, this time in a rather unexpected way. So now this new installment's going to tip the scale one way or the other. Should Pacific Rim go on as a franchise, or should it just lay down and die? Well, let's find out. Pacific Rim the Black. So Pacific Rim the Black is a continuation of the Pacific Rim franchise. You remember that movie from Guillermo del Toro that came out in 2013? Big robots versus invading monsters? I personally thought that movie was awesome. And then the sequel came out a few years later, and it was really just underwhelming. No one liked it as much, and thus that killed any chances of Pacific Rim being a solid trilogy. But now on Netflix we have a new anime series that continues the Pacific Rim story. So alright, I'm all for it. Let's watch it. So Pacific Rim the Black takes place after Pacific Rim Uprising. It takes place in Australia, and it's pretty much gone to the shitter. Kaiju have ravaged the entire continent, so most of the population was evacuated, but some people were left behind. Enter our main characters, Taylor and Haley. Their brother and sister, their parents left in a Jaeger 5 years ago. They were gonna go get help, and then they just never returned. So now they're in their community, they're just trying to survive, and one day they stumble across a Jaeger, Atlas Destroyer. So now they get caught up in the whole adventure. They get mixed in with this shady group of bad guys led by this guy named Shane, who's a real douche. They find this kid with a solid amount of mystery behind him. He doesn't really know what's what. He's kind of like 11 from Stranger Things season 1. And so here we go with new Pacific Rim story. And I was really looking forward to this actually, because it's a continuation of Pacific Rim. No matter how disappointing it might be, I'm always going to look forward to a continuation of Pacific Rim, because that first movie was just so awesome. So this show was definitely on my to-watch list. But after finishing it, I was like, alright, well, that happened. It had some things I liked and some things I didn't like. The setup was really good. The first couple episodes, they introduced us to the world and the characters, and I ended up really liking Taylor and Haley. You believe them as siblings, the emotions are realistic, the voice acting's pretty good. You do end up feeling a little bit bad for them, you know, they're just in a really dire situation. And so when they stumble across this big Jaeger, the show does get a little fun. I mean, the AI in this Jaeger named Loa, she actually had some of the funniest moments in the show, just with conversations she had with either Taylor or Haley or someone else. I just found that I was actually laughing out loud at some of those moments.
Welcome, Cadet. I am Loa. Why did you enter this facility through the roof?
Shortcut.
And why did you not use the ladder?
Shorter cut?
But then as the show was going on with the episodes, it started to remind me of Uprising in that it tried to expand the lore a little too much. It added new elements to the Pacific Rim world. And some things I was actually like, alright, that's pretty interesting. I'm down for that. But most things I was like, it's too much like Uprising. I don't like that. I mean, this bad guy crew that Taylor and Haley end up getting mixed up with, they were interesting enough. But this guy Shane, he's one of those bad guys where he'll kill like one of his own men just to prove how much of a bad guy he is. For me, I just didn't really see any depth to his character. He was a pretty uninteresting villain. All there really was to him is that he was mean. And he was super mean, but that doesn't mean I like him as a villain. I was like, yeah, this guy's a douche. Take him down. Kill him already. Let's get to the kaiju and Jaeger fights, because that's what Pacific Rim is all about. Or that's what it's supposed to be all about anyway. And yeah, there are some pretty entertaining kaiju Jaeger fights in the show. But I mean, this being an anime, it's not gonna feel as big in scale. The animation's really good, but the Jaeger and kaiju fights, as entertaining as they are, of course are not going to be as big and slow as the first Pacific Rim movie. I mean, just the fact that this is an animated show will prove that. And normally that wouldn't be a gripe to the show, since it's an animated show. But this is Pacific Rim we're talking about here. One of the things that made Pacific Rim so awesome to begin with is the fact that these Jaegers and kaiju are so big and slow, you feel the scale of it. I was watching the first Pacific Rim movie on my nice flat screen TV. I got a nice big 77-inch TV. It's a nice big screen, but even watching that first Pacific Rim movie on it, I was like, this screen is not big enough. Because Pacific Rim is all about enormity. You feel like the only way to watch Pacific Rim anything is on an IMAX screen, you know? So this being a smaller scale animated show, yeah, the fights do not feel as big and grand and epic. I mean, they're entertaining, sure, yeah, they are. And they look cool too. But at this point, I feel like nothing is ever going to live up to the epicness that was the first Pacific Rim movie. And I mean, seeing the trailers for this show, you don't expect it to. I'm just validating that it doesn't. And like I said, some of the storylines in the later episodes, they try to expand the lore of the Pacific Rim world, and some things I liked, I was like, that was solid, but most things I was like, this is reminding me of Uprising, don't do that. I like how they did the neural handshake in this show. You know how it takes two people to pilot a Jaeger, and they do it by mind melding through memories. They have to link up their brains by sharing their memories of their past. The way it was visualized in the show, I was like, alright, that's cool. It's not like the first Pacific Rim movie, but I thought it was cool. And the show shows that some of the side effects of mind melding with people, it can have an effect on you. And I like how the show illustrated that. The first movie did it too, but the way they did it in the show, I was like, all right, I can accept that. But that's really the one expansion on the world that this show did that I could get behind. Everything else the show did to expand, I was like, this is too weird. Like the kid, for example. Like I said, he's a lot like Eleven from Stranger Things Season 1. He has a lot of mystery, some abilities that I don't want to get into because they're spoilers, but it is kind of like that, and I was like, this is too weird. This was not in the first movie. I'm not saying that just because it wasn't in the first movie that makes it bad. I'm just saying it felt too different. It's like they're bringing some sort of supernatural element in. Well, it was always supernatural, but you get what I'm saying. It felt like something from another franchise was suddenly in Pacific Rim. Also, there's this big creature that they have to deal with that's like part Jaeger, part kaiju. It's like a mix of both, and they tie that in with Pacific Rim Uprising, and I was like, no, just, it didn't work in that movie and it doesn't work here. Why did they think that would work? And yeah, that's the thing about the show, is that it actually ties in with both movies. And it was weird because the way it tied in with the first one, I was like, that's really interesting. That's really cool. Well done, Pacific Rim the Black. I'm not gonna say how it does it because again, that's a spoiler, but just the way they did that, I was like, all right, props. They even got one of the actors from the first movie to come back and voice a character briefly, so that gets some serious props from me. But when the show tied in with the second Pacific Rim movie, I was like, no, don't do that. I mean, kudos for sticking to your guns, you know? The show was like, no, that movie is canon, when you could have just wiped that movie away from canon. In hindsight, that's probably what you should have done, because I didn't like the fact that they tied this in with Pacific Rim Uprising, because all it did was remind me of a bad movie, and that alone is a couple minus points. Also, the music in this show. I don't know what I was expecting the music in this show to be. It was fine and functional for what it was, but let's face it, when it comes to music in Pacific Rim, nothing will ever beat the score from the first movie from Ramin Djawadi, because that was just such an epic theme. I love that theme to death, and at least it showed up a couple times in the second movie. It's nowhere in this show. And yeah, I'll admit, that left me disappointed a little bit. I didn't hate the score in this show, but I'm not getting the soundtrack. So in the end, Pacific Rim the Black, it just happened. It had things I liked, it had things I didn't like, and ultimately that balances out to, I kind of nothing the show. I watched it. It's definitely a show that came out this year. I like the characters fine enough, especially the main characters. I like them and I cared about them enough. Taylor and Haley are probably the best things about the show. I like their dynamic, their chemistry. The animation in the show is really good, although the frame rate was the funny thing. Sometimes things moved in really good speed, like 24 frames a second, but at other times the characters were moving, it felt like 6 frames a second or something. Kind of like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but I felt it worked in that movie more than it did here. Because Pacific Rim the Black is not trying to bring a comic book to life. So there's really no reason for the frame rate of characters to be different in different scenes. Yeah, that felt kind of weird too. It took some getting used to. The Jaeger kaiju fights in the show were entertaining, but of course they're just nowhere near as epic as the first movie. And the music was boring. So I would say watch the show if you're a hardcore Pacific Rim fan. I mean, if you have Netflix, it's free. It's not going to cost you anything. Watch the first 2 episodes anyway, because they're like the best part. Then if you lose interest a few episodes later, that's understandable. No one will knock you for it, or at least I won't. This season does set up for a season 2 in a really weird way. I was like, what is that? That's just another weird thing that felt kind of out of place, like it was from another franchise. I don't know. At this point, I don't even know if I'm gonna watch season 2, just based off how I felt about season 1. We'll see though, I guess. So Pacific Rim the Black, have you watched it? What did you think about it? What did you think about it compared to the movies? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.